Hello YouTube, this is Sam Garens from ḥurūf.com. Today is Thursday the 9th of January 2020, and today I'm going to continue with my thoughts about Colin Wilson, and I'm reading again from the introduction section of Colin Wilson's The Age of Defeat. I'm not actually reading the words of Colin Wilson at this point. I'm going to read the introduction, or some parts of it, which I just thought were so good that if you want an introduction to this man's thoughts, you could do a lot worse than just hear what I'm going to read you. This introduction was written by a Thomas F. Bertanu, who is he's a literature professor somewhere or other. But I don't know why I find myself using the word but it's extremely well written, and I'm going to read you some excerpts. So he writes, "In Religion and the Rebel," which is one of Wilson's books, asserted what an incipient neo-Puritanism forbade anyone socially responsible to assert, namely that the religious impulse and its attendant mystic vision qualifies itself ultimately as more necessary for the good of a society than the managerial provisions of the welfare state, as guided by the jejune precepts of socialism, rationalism, and humanism. Wilson writes in in Religion and the Rebel of, quote, the need for a visionary and anti-humanistic attitude to counteract the unreality of life as men and women confront it in a disenchanted consumerist world. And I would say actually men confront it in a disenchanted world, because that's what I'm really talking about, and that's the truth, because women, generally speaking, and I'm not against women or anything, but women like a consumerist world. Anyway, next page. This is Wilson writing, quote, "I wanted to explain why, in an age of pessimism, I was possessed by an absolutely absurd optimism, and his," end quote, and his explanation took root in his powerful intuition about the objectivity and even the impersonality of meaning. And this is the whole point, you see. This society gets you to believe that nothing means anything. And because why would you follow a revelation from God? Why can't you just eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die? Why don't you just want tons of money like everybody else? But actually the crux of it all is to do with meaning. Quote, "When I go out on a spring morning or listen to music, I am clearly conscious of a sense of meaning, which seems to me to be inherent in the universe itself, the product of some external intelligence, not just a feeling." End quote. Wilson's a perception of meaning directly contradicts the dogmatic pieties of the modern worldview, supposing it could be called a worldview. And by that, I'm really, to sort of summarize it, is YOLO. You only live once. And that's what it gets you, because I think human beings are essentially rational. And the reason why they behave as they do now is because they believe they're behaving consistently with what they actually believe. And what they actually believe is that there is no higher good or virtue than consumption. I'm skipping a bit. "For the sake of maintaining that optimum of collective happiness, the polity must sanction the individual who preaches on behalf of things transcendent." And this is written in quite turgid, very precise academic writing. So basically the policy is going to be against anyone who appeals to a higher reality than simply stuff and going shopping. In The Republic, Plato famously inserts his extended true myth of the cave, the dwellers in which have inferred the structure of reality only from shadows cast on a wall, from the theatre of which, due to their being chained on a bench, they cannot avert their gaze. This is a very famous thing. I've talked about it in other places, so I'm not going to go on. But who is being irrational? if you're in the cave and people are just seeing the shadows being thrown up on the wall from the true light outside, if you go out and say this isn't enough, I want to go out and see what's really out there, everyone turning around and telling you that you're crazy. Well, who's crazy in this situation? What is the provision they have against death? What have they actually done? As the Quran says, whither are you going? Where do you think you're going? And we weren't always like this, you see. Just in the same way as people didn't always walk around looking at telephones and letting telephones handle the education of their children. There was a time when it was possible to have actual conversations. It was also possible. There was a time when men generally accepted that there were virtues higher than simply their own, than slaking their own thirsts. That people would live for a value, for something beyond what can just be sort of measured with a slide rule. How's this? In a notebook entry from the 1940s, Baudelaire writes that, quote, nations, like families, only produce great men in spite of themselves, end quote. In fact, Baudelaire continues, they make every effort not to produce them, end quote. Here's another bit. Being materialist and communist, the revolution was likewise utilitarian. He's talking about the French Revolution here. Under its regime of pretended liberation, human beings became a resource, as they are to this day in large corporations. When a man proves himself other than useful, the corporate regime will see fit to discard him. It is useful, meanwhile, to the corporate regime that people should resemble one another as much as possible, so as to be interchangeable. The corporate regime, therefore, encourages a radical type of conformity at the lowest level, which Baudelaire already saw in the middle of his century. This is the 1800s. The corporate regime reveals itself through that program as seeking the annihilation of the individual, and thereby qualifies itself as nihilistic. Does this not describe what you're living through? I'm going to read this section because it's really good. I'll skip a bit, but Ortega, and here we're talking about José Ortega y Gasset, who I hadn't come across, but Ortega remarks the conjunction in modernity's notion of itself of an auto-idolatrous attitude. Auto-idolatrous. So I could have written that. And a celebration of conformist mediocrity over meritorious individual achievement. This is you see, even if you've got these things like American Idol, and there are other equivalents in other places. The idea is that everyone's sort of a hero, but they're not real heroes. They're not allowed to be genuinely really, really good. The idea is they're sort of snatched up from the masses, and then it doesn't work if they're already really great at it. And there has to be a transformation out of the rabble into sort of the foothills of the gods, as it were. But if you're already in the foothills of the gods, if you're already great at it, there isn't that story. There's no arc. People want that arc, because then you're not allowed to be really great at stuff. Don't want that. I mean, we do kind of want it for the new gods, but we know it's not true, and we like it when they fall. What I'm trying to say in all of this is that we're living in an anti-achievement environment, actually. And this is Soviet. This is another part of what I noticed in the Soviet Union, where anybody who's really good at anything just got stamped down. Now, to continue with his thoughts about mediocrity, the very name is a disturbing one. This time calls itself modern, that is to say final, definitive, in whose presence all the rest is mere preterite, humble preparation and aspiration towards this present. End quote. The notion ensconces itself in a framework of so-called democracy, which the ancients saw as the equivalent of rule by the rabble. Now, of course, we don't really have democracy, but even if we did, it would be a completely idiotic system of government. We don't have it. What we have is ruled by a small coterie of fabulously wealthy elitists through the illusion of democracy, obviously. Well, I think anybody who follows this channel gets that much, surely. Quote, the mass man regards himself as perfect. And this is another thing, people don't like it if you won't go along with that thesis. As Ortega writes, and quote, it never occurs to the mediocre man of our days, to the new Adam, to doubt of his own plenitude, end quote. The mass man, being filled to the brim with a baseless self-confidence, rejects all standards. And because standards can only originate in a past, mass man rejects the past. People are glorying in their ignorance. They don't want a past, they don't want anything. They just want yay, just this sort of bland fun. You see, fun really is the kind of, I think it's almost the Holy Spirit of the mass man. He's ahistorical, he's cultureless. His only leisure is in entertainment or sport, activities that others perform for him while he spectates. I think this is going through to religion and everything else now. People don't see themselves as actors, as in actually taking action. They think that supporting or adding thumbs up to something is action. Ortega writes, when all these things are lacking, there is, in the strictest sense of the word, barbarism. End quote. Ortega describes mass man as moving with the crowd, as merging with the crowd, as finally discarding his individuality altogether by sacrificing it to the crowd. This is an idolatrous system. I'm going to skip a bit. Moving now to a guy called Spengler. Spengler is famous mostly for his decline of the West, decline of the Western world. Spengler's analysis of nihilism begins with the observation that, quote, the opposite of noble is not poor, but vulgar. Quote, unquote. Vulgar sentiments drive the, quote, uprooted masses of great cities, end quote, whose ends are reducible to, quote, revenge and destruction, end quote. But revenge on and destruction of what? Anything that might offer an objective measure. This is fascinating, because this system doesn't want you to have any standards. In fact, if you have any standards, you're called a bigot. It won't allow any standards, because those standards expose it for what it is, which is, what is it? Revenge and destruction. Objectivity, a sign of reality, is the devil of crowd, which the crowd would expel. Out of such motives, as Spengler writes, quote, a radical bloc is formed whose trade is to fight against the formative forces of the culture, and that puts the masses in its tutelage by means of franchise, freedom of the press, and terrorism, end quote. Such a mass mentality will choose ugliness over beauty, slovenliness over decorum, coercion over procedure, and what that means is tyranny. And that's exactly what you're getting. What do you think the Me Too movement is about? It's about bringing in coercion over process, no due process, no actual law, no actual evidence, just feelings. Bing, and your life's done. Quote, this is born nihilism, Spengler writes, the abysmal hatred of the proletarian, of higher form of every sort, of culture in its essence, of society as its upholder and historical product, end quote. It is the milieu of nihilism, quote, superiority, manners, taste, and every description of inward rank are crimes, end quote. Again, what I saw in the Soviet Union, it was a crime to have talent, abilities, so on. I mean, certainly if they were combined with being of the wrong class. There can be no heroism of any kind, but only conformity and anonymity. I get this a lot. I get people who I know that they actually would love to do what I do, and they are envious of it because they're actually bound by their own cowardice. And I think that some of these people have got great potential, quite honestly, but what they haven't got is they haven't got courage. And what they're doing is they're misunderstanding courage. It's not like you have it in these huge amounts. What you do is you start and you get it. And that's what I've discovered. See, this isn't just about, this isn't like castigating people saying they're all bad. I'm just saying that this is how it is. But your life was meant to be an epic. It was meant to be, it was meant to be a battle that you finish, bloodied but unbowed. But to do it, you have to pick up your sword. You have to see that there is a battle to be fought, and you have to see something beyond it. You have to see the Day of Judgment, because nothing puts all of this into perspective like that does. But you have to, if you're going to fight that fight, you have to see that. And that's partly why I'm not talking about, in a religious sense exactly. This whole system is working against the individual. I don't care about mass movements. Don't care. I was thinking the other day, it wouldn't actually make a whole lot of difference to me if, obviously, it's nice if people confirm what you do and so on. But if, let's say, my family and the entire, let's say, the Islamic world all said, yeah, you know what, Sam, we've been through your work with a fine-tooth comb, you're completely right, we were wrong. It won't make any difference to me. Because what does it change? It doesn't change anything. I'm not here to be right. I'm not here to participate in all of the, the online forums and all their stuff and blah, 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 which is just basically it's a parlour game, really, is all it is. There is the Quranic template is a call to, it's not just about glorifying the past or glorifying those men who've been before. It's about seeing this as a template, something that you can do. I find that reality exhilarating, and when it's infused with purpose and applied with intelligence, suddenly you get the oxygen back in your blood. You see, you stop being corporate man, you stop being a mass man, and this is available. This is available to anyone. It's not, it's not some special talent that I have. I just grabbed it, and I'm not saying, look at me, I've got this. I'm saying you grab it too. That's what I'm saying. You see, if you're still with me in this video and you understand what I'm talking about, that's good. It means you're unlikely to be a mass man. Now, does it mean that I think there are going to be lots of people who are going to do this? No, I don't think that. In fact, my experience demonstrates to me that that's not the case. Historically, it's never been the case. But it doesn't mean there aren't others out there, other outsiders. I'm going to continue. So in this milieu of nihilism, there can be no heroism of any kind, but only conformity and anonymity. National Socialist propaganda and Communist propaganda included a theme of pseudo-heroism, and this is true. But it consisted entirely in the nihilistic self-sacrifice of the individual to the state. And that's what they're bringing back now with this, I can't remember her name, but that autistic Swedish deviant adolescent, which is utterly National Socialist and Communist, meme. What they're going to use is they're going to use the environment, and they're already doing it. It's the same story over and over again. So it comes up in all these different sort of wearing different garb. If you read Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces, for example, it's just, there are very few stories, very few narratives out there, and the same sort of things, they repeat and repeat. So that's what they're doing there, and they're going to do this again. And they're also pushing, as you probably noticed, they're pushing suicide, government-assisted suicide, and then it'll be government-mandated suicide. And it's all the same thing. They want standardized people that basically just worship the state. In place of heroism, so I'm continuing now, the modern world has bureaucratic promotion. These words, you could read this several times. And skipping a bit. Wilson observes that, quote, the mark of greatness in human endeavour is always intuition, not logic. Now, I'm not anti-logic, I'm not anti-analysis, but if there's no intuition, if there's no just, apprehension of things beyond what is seen, that which is seen, then you're just bean counting, aren't you? Skip. To rise above mediocrity, the human, I would say, the man, the human being, it says here, but let's go with man, requires goals that provoke and challenge him. It's an example when Napoleon was on the Isle of Elba and he apparently escaped, got back to France. I think probably he was the British turned a blind eye, but anyway, he ended up back in France again. The French army just rose as one man once they saw him there. Why? Because death isn't the worst. The worst is a meaningless existence, and that is what this system wants you to buy. And if you buy it, all you're going to do is hate yourself. And in fact, if you read even as much of Colin Wilson as I have read through Gary Lachman, most of addiction and sexual obsession is really just trying to get to meaning and away from the tyranny of what Colin Wilson calls the robot. And the reason why I'm talking generally about the Quran and various things. Why am I talking about this? The reason in essence is that because at the one part when I read the Gary Lachman book, I realized that Wilson was talking about how to stay in the state where you are accessing this vision beyond the commonly seen. And he talks about poetry. He talks about a historical vista, which in which you access thousands of years ago, and heroism and he's going on and this whole couple of paragraphs. I read it. I thought, you've just described the Quran. That's exactly what this is. It's this book. Reading this book. I'm not talking about reading it and just shouting it and screaming it and all of this tajweed nonsense. I'm talking about reading it and really internalizing it. That's exactly what it does. It helps you access this. It is a machine, if you want a better word, or a mechanism for accessing exactly this. However, so far Wilson doesn't talk about the Quran at all. He was interested at one point he did read the Bhagavad Gita, and he rejected Christianity on the basis of he didn't accept that Jesus Christ would have he didn't think that his sacrifice meant anything. He thought it was made up by the Apostle Paul, and you won't hear any argument from me on that one. I really want to give you a bit more. If you're still with me, anybody who's stuck this out this long, they're going to stick to the end, aren't they? So I'm just going to read a few more because this is great. Wilson, commenting on the Enlightenment, that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek term, I would say, writes, quote, with 18th century rationalism, the idea of the goal of history disappeared, with history, end quote, with history becoming a meaningless, quote, succession of events, end quote. And this transformation found its codification when the, quote, scientific attitude replaced the religious attitude and banished free will from the universe. Who wants to live? Who can live in that? I don't live in that universe. I live in a history which is current. For me, the Quran is current. For me, the lessons of that book are current. It ties me. I have a filial attachment with the people in that book, and I see the archetypes around me today. So I'm not living in that I'm not living in that meaningless world. I live in a a world that is pregnant with meaning. Skipping a lot here, and he's talking about somebody called Reisman. Observe that in contrast to the adolescent books of the now superseded, quote, era of inner direction, the books offered to young readers by the prevailing other directed era work their stories around heroes whose heroism is only ostensible in that it has no internal moral correlative. I'm sorry about the turgid writing here, but what it's really saying is that the heroes are not working through any sort of moral process. They're just heroes because they're heroes. They're not working out their salvation with fear and trembling. They're just, they've just got big muscles. Quote, morality in the sense of a literary character's development rather than morality in the sense of being on the side of law and right is not explored in the story. Reisman's coinages of inner directed and other directed take the rhetorical edge off their counterpart terms in Ortega and Spengler. I'll try to spare you some of the middle of this. Skipping again. To be extraordinary is a priori a type of offence to the, quote, dull and fine. Whatever appears to the crowd as extraordinary, it will tear down, invoking its self-endowed and self-leveraging privilege to do so. Then talks about Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, which I read and thought was very interesting. All right, get this bit. This is Reisman talking again. What is common to all the other directed people, and when other directed means looking to other people to give you your sense of what's right, what's wrong, what you're going to do. What is common to all of these other directed people is that their contemporaries are the source of direction for the individual, either those known to him or those with whom he's indirectly acquainted through friends and through the mass media. So that's the difference. Get this bit. Everyone today goes about with his cell phone held directly in front of his face. The cell phone represents the perfected technology of other directedness. As such, the cell phone is a dehumanizing, anti-heroic device designed to obliterate internal resource by preventing its formation in the first place, and to enforce the uninterrupted deferral of one person to another as fast as the speed of light. All right. Skipping ahead a little bit here. Nihilism, however, is not a philosophy. It is a morbid attitude. And then talks about Camus and various Sartre. Probably not, if you're interested by the book. Okay. The Age, and here it's talking about this book, The Age of Defeat, is Wilson's call for a renewed heroism to be based on a revived existentialism rooted in visionary acuity. I apologise if you're not used to reading this kind of stuff. It is very exact, but it's not bad. It's actually very good. The idea of the hero, Wilson writes, is of a man who needs to expand, who needs wider fields for his activities. He is the man who cannot accept the status quo. As Wilson sees it, heroism in its purest definition is an appetite for freedom, a desire to live more intensely. Wilson's identification of expansion with heroism links the heroic endeavour with transcendence and with the affirmation of reality. What Wilson saw almost 60 years ago, a world retreating into the cave of bureaucratic procedure, the regulation of everything, including the mind, and the infantilism of hackneyed entertainment culture has not improved over the decades. Yeah, I'll say. It has only grown worse. The representative human specimen of today is, in Wilson's words, quote, the man for whom the idea of freedom is a contradiction of his present way of life, end quote. So people are in prison because they don't want freedom. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. People are going to do what they're going to do. But there are a few, see, the few. And I am interested in them. Okay, this is the summary of this excellent introduction by Thomas Bertonu. And he concludes with the words, the outsider, the age of defeat, and the new existentialism inspired me to intellectual endeavour. These are all books by Colin Wilson. I cannot recommend acquaintance with Wilson strongly enough. I cannot strongly enough urge those who already know Wilson to revisit him. I owe a debt to Wilson's living light fountain that I can never repay. If you like books, and it doesn't, you may like this. And as I say, this is not a 100% recommendation because I haven't read 100% of his work, but he does describe in modern terms the angst that anybody who is not satisfied with being a mass man feels. And I think that the existential loneliness that is actually so prevalent today, that when you can burst out of that and start to become inner directed, then we'll see some leadership. So I'm going to leave it there. That's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Quran free using the button in the top right hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Quranite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop down below. I recommend meetquranite.com to connect with other Quran alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.